Okay, so welcome to the Heaven's Vault panel with Eli, Sarah, and Dash. Eli and Sarah are CrossingsCon staff, and Dash is our friend who we bullied into playing this game. Just a quick reminder for attendees that if you enjoy this panel and the convention, we will be in person next summer in Montreal, and you can find out more after the panel at the info desk or at register.crossingscon.org. So, to get us started, so Heaven's Vault is a video game about space archaeology. And to get us started, I'm going to have our panelists answer, each are going to answer a question. They will have 1 minute to answer this question. I have a very lovely stopwatch. And if they go over,
and also attacked.
and if they go over, I will be borrowing Linguistics After Dark's cattle prod. So let's start with Eli. Can you please briefly describe the setting of the game and the task set before the protagonist?
Yeah, first thing that I will say is that this panel is spoilerific. So if you don't want to know spoilers about the game, this is probably a good time to head out. Because we're going to have to spoil probably some pretty deep things in order to talk about it. Now that I've used 15 seconds of my time, the game is about Alia, who is a space archaeologist and possibly also budding linguist, who has been given the task of figuring out why another professor from the university has not come back, even though the head of the university sent him off to go do a thing. And then she hops from moon to moon and explores lots of things and finds artifacts and slowly pieces together, or has you piece together, both the ancient language from the nebula in which she lives and also the history of what has happened over several ages spanning several thousand years in that nebula.
Nice.
Nice.
Nicely done.
All right.
All right. Next up. Oh.
No, don't mind me.
Well,
Unless I'm next.
You have the next. You're next.
Okay, then I'll switch to my nice microphone after this.
So, Dash, what is the protagonist's job?
Right. So what Eli said is not exactly accurate. So she is, according to the game, she is a historian. But she's really more of like a 19th century treasure hunter and crackpot scientist. Her ideas about the history of the nebula are not accepted by the rest of the academic community, such as it is.
You have 20 more seconds if you want, but...
Well, is Sarah back?
I'm almost there. Take your 20 seconds.
Okay. Like, it's, as far as I can tell, her actual, like, job, like, the way that she, like, keeps herself fed is she goes out, finds ruins, steals artifacts, handles them without gloves, doesn't take any notes, and just sells them to people.
She takes notes.
Sometimes. On the language, on the graffiti that she finds. She doesn't take any notes on
part.
She doesn't keep track of where she found things. She has no respect for okay, fine.
Don't worry, y'all, we'll get into it.
Okay.
Sarah, how's your computer?
Oh, it's trying really hard, but I'm standing outside Tirnanog, unallowed to move. So I'll voice this one.
Okay. Well, while you're figuring that one out, why don't you tell us what are the top 3 ways that the inscription translation puzzles reflect real linguistic field and/or archaeological fieldwork, and the top 3 ways that they absolutely don't?
All right. Well, one of the things that I think the game does really well is that all of the inscriptions and all of the translations that you have to do are contextualized. So every time you translate a piece of this language, it's somewhere. It is on a sword, it's on a mantle, it's on a fireplace, it's somewhere. And more often than you would expect for a video game, I felt like that context helped you figure out what it was supposed to say. If you paid attention, which I didn't always do, but you know. The other thing that was really interesting and that you can do that is kind of realistic is finding patterns from word to word and using both the context of where you found it, but also other words you've previously learned. And the fact that it's written in what's called scriptio continua, where you don't have spaces between words, which was very popular in a lot of ancient languages and is still popular in some pictographic languages or logographic languages like Chinese and Japanese. I assume I'm at time, so I'll save my bad news for later in the panel.
Thank you. So, if there is anyone still here who has not shut up, anyone here who has not played the game, there is your 3-minute summary. We hope you're okay with spoilers. So for our first question, there's so many. So for our first question, which I will be nice and maybe not wave the stopwatch at the screen for, the Heavens Vault setting has a lot of neat parts in it. Moons, belief systems, cultures, etc. Which parts most grabbed your attention, and was there anything that didn't quite fit together how you hoped it would? And do I need to pick on someone, or
what order are we going in? Because I will just start yelling.
Congrats, you're
nobody
first
else
now.
wants to go. Cool. So the loop. Let's talk about the loop. Because the loop is the state religion of the mainstream dominant culture of the nebula at the time at the current era that Alia is living in. The loop is it's not entirely clear whether it's a reincarnation belief or like a literal time is going to start over belief. Like I wasn't able to kind of get that completely clear. It might be a mix of both, honestly. But like
that was my thought, is that it's it's some people believe one and some people believe the other.
Yeah. Okay. But the basic idea of it is that there's like about 1,000 years worth of events and then things start over. And so this is part of why, and because the state religion, because it's the state religion and the state religion runs the state, which runs the university. This is why Alia is a crackpot scientist, because she actually believes she is finding evidence for more history than the religion allows for. When I first found out what the loop actually meant, I actually had to like stop playing for a minute and like gather myself. It was a lot to take in, because that being the context for a game that is supposed to be about uncovering the history of the nebula, that no one else believes in the history of the nebula officially, right? Like that puts your main character in a really interesting sort of place, like plot-wise. So like that was definitely the thing that affected me the most in terms of like something in the world building or the setup.
Yeah, I wanna branch off of that a little bit, because you're talking about the religion or the belief system, and I kind of want to talk about the politics and the
Oh yeah.
The introduction of that. And I actually, there is politics, there's micro politics that happens in the game. But actually, one of the things that I think the game does really well with the world is, as you go through the world, you discover, okay, there was this age, and then that became this other age, and the power shifted to over here, and we had an age of trade and an age of sail, and then people lost how to sail, and then now, there was a revolution, and there was a reestablishment of power, and there was an erasing of history and all of this stuff. But I think, at least as far as a video game can do, because nothing is going to be infinitely detailed the way that real history is. But the video game sets up a lot of these things where, on Iox, it's unquestioned what you are supposed to believe and so on. And Alia basically gets away with it because Mayari lets her, and Mayari is nominally in charge, right? And also, I think Mayari thinks that it's important that Alia needs to exist and be let out, actually. But you've got places like Renaki, which is very far away. There's a market moon, it's pretty rich, and basically, as far as I can tell, has nothing to do with Iox. And Iox has not tried to conquer Renaki, or they've tried and they have failed, or something like that. So you've got politics over there where people just don't care. And you've got stuff like Mercy, where they are basically totally under the heel of Iox. You've got Elbereth, where they are similarly there, but they have this history of being, of knowing that they are more. And on Elbereth, you have people in the Cactus, and you have the people in the God's Feet slums. And so I think they did a really good job of not making it a nebula of hats. This is the one true thing, and everybody believes it. I think they did a really good job of creating believable sort of surviving pockets or independent pockets of these things that you get to discover in the present, which is sort of homomorphic to the idea that you also have these twists and turns in the past. So I think that's actually one of the things I really like, is that you learn as much about the present as you do about the past, and they kind of bounce off of each other as you're playing the game.
Yeah, it's a fairly cohesive cultural setting.
Yeah. And a lot of games don't do that. They just kind of go, here's what the world is like, and everybody is kind of the same here.
Yeah, actually, like the fact that class differences and cultural differences exist in the game is unusual and really cool, actually, I will say.
I do wonder if the class differences existing in the game have to do with it being a UK studio. A lot of big studios are American studios. In American society, class is an individual thing. In the UK, I mean, broadly speaking, in America, class mobility exists, and in the UK, it really doesn't, and it's pretty ossified into society.
Actually, that's a really interesting point, because part of what really sets Alia apart and makes her so much an outsider is not just her thoughts about history, but more explicitly the fact that she has moved classes.
Mm-hmm.
She was born in Elbereth. She was an orphan, and she went, and then she was adopted by someone from Iox, who was actually very highly placed in the government religion university. And she now has lots of signifiers of affluence, to the point where she walks into Elbereth, where she used to live, and everyone treats her like an outsider and calls her an Ioxian and other rude things.
There is a lot of opportunity in the game for you and or Alia to have a conversation or a discussion about Alia's cultural and class-based identity.
Yeah.
I see that Sarah is trying to get here, but I also want to make sure she gets a chance to weigh in here.
Thank you, Eli. Yeah, I am trying valiantly to actually walk to the stage, but my other persona here keeps freezing up. I mean, you guys have touched on a lot of the kind of overarching things that are really interesting about this setting, but I actually want to drill down on just one tiny little quirk that I think is really cool and speaks a lot about both the world itself and also like the thought process that seems to have gone into it. which is that, so there's this ancient language that that Alia is trying to decode. That's like half of her job. But there's also the language that is being spoken by all of the characters. And I was thinking about this a lot during the Conlang panel last night, where, I mean, Kat made the point of like, you know, sometimes coffee is just coffee, and you don't need to ask Germans about the word for the ocean. You can ask them about Schadenfreude, because like that's the cool, interesting word that English doesn't have. And while the ancient language is like the real mystery and the real puzzle of the game, and the modern or the contemporary language that Alia speaks is not just English. Like, it is English for the benefit of us who are playing the game, but it also reflects the usage and the like culture of where she lives. So, for instance, she has all of these particular like she has so many like swears, but not really swears, just like exclamations of astonishment by the goddess and her insert noun here, by all of the wind, wake, waters, insert weather pattern here. Because
did you ever see by the fake goddesses?
No.
all are imposters. Yes.
The imposters. Yes.
Yes, that was very good.
Yes.
And then there's also just a really interesting there's a word that never shows up in the game, which you don't think about it because it never shows up. And then you're like, oh, there's this whole outer space game and no one has ever said the word planet. And also, they treat the sun like it is some kind of mythical object that no one has ever seen in real life.
Yes.
And like on the surface, you're just like, oh, well, they say moon instead of planet. But then you're like, well, but they translated this alternate universe language into English for our benefit, so why would they not translate it as planet? Well, that probably means something, and we don't know what. That is like, that's out there. Maybe it's involved somewhere in the story and we haven't found it yet, or maybe that's just left as an exercise to the player. I don't know. But I just think it's a really interesting like level of detail that they went to.
I mean, I had a running theory for most of the game that I think has been literally smashed to pieces by the extra information I got during Masha's final run through last night, because you got more information from the finale than I did. No, seriously, if you don't want spoilers, leave. Anyway, so you got more out of the eagle than I did. Like you got an explicit explanation of how it happened, and as far as I can tell, what happened is that the ship accidentally crashed into a planet and broke a planet apart, and that's why we've got moons. And like it's either so far away from the from the sun from the star that it's circling around that it doesn't register or as a sun, or we've got a wandering planet, which honestly I think is more likely because like they miscalculated somehow and they thought they were coming into empty space and they didn't, right? And that's interesting to me because like our moon exists because a giant asteroid crashed into the Earth and then ended up kind of getting stuck in the gravitational well, right? Like that's how we got our moon. So like them choosing that to be moon, I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
I think it's the right word to use for, especially since all of these locations are just like these dingy little cracked rocks. They are not round. They are not large. They are just these little tiny fragments of rock, right? So like
Hey, we have
that
a
are
Sarah.
too small to even pull themselves into a ball shape. So like, yeah. Anyway, hi Sarah.
Hi. I think I'm still lagging a little bit, but we're gonna see how well this works. Is it recording okay if I'm here twice?
Yeah, it's fine.
Cool. All right, what's our next question?
So, you actually picked a really nice segue to talking about the little piece of modern language, because our next question is about the ancient language, which is a huge part of the setting and the game. And what strategies did you all use to translate and learn the language? How did the language interact with the setting?
This is a really fraught question because Sarah and I both watched Dash's playthrough, and they did not get a chance to watch either of ours. And
Yes.
if you go and you watch Dash's stream, which is Meerkat Dash on Twitch, give you a little shout out there.
Thank you, but it's mostly gone now because I play very slowly. So actually, you're going to want. I'll be putting it on a new channel because my current channel is just badly named, but it's on Capybara Chard. Like capybara like the animal, chard like the vegetable, together is my current YouTube channel where I'm throwing all of my Heaven's Vault stuff. There will be a new channel eventually, but for now, that's where it is.
Yeah. Sarah and I basically are yelling at each other in the chat anytime that Dash is translating things, because Dash was very, very thorough in trying to do everything independently themselves, without, I've written down all of the words and all of the possible meanings, and let's go correlate. One of the reasons I bring this up is because for me, I really liked the translation aspect. It was the thing that made me interested in the game. And when I did it, I don't know if it is because of a linguistics background or because of just who I am, but I just rammed my way through it. I was just like, what makes the most sense here? I've got some pictograms. They kind of look like stuff that, I'm just going to try. And you know what? If I'm wrong, I will come back later and I will figure it out, learn more as we go through the text and come back. And maybe that's because I've had some experience translating stuff, maybe not. But I think a big thing was just sort of what is the thing that makes the most sense in context with what I know? And then I think eventually I will learn whether I was right or wrong. And just kind of punched my way right through it as quickly as I could.
Which explains why your constant refrain was, trust your feelings!
Yes.
Yes. The really fun part is that if you're super dedicated, you can find not only me and Eli yelling at each other, but us yelling in ROT13, so that Dash wouldn't get spoiled. And I will tell you now, Dash, that so if you're really dedicated, you can retype all that gibberish into the decoder and find out what we said. But I will tell you that the majority of what we said was, oh my god, it's a verb! It's a fucking verb!
Or, you found it above a fireplace, it probably means fire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that one I got on my own. Thank you very much.
You did. I think it was the water in the well one that you spent a long time debating over.
Well, that was my second or third
That's true.
piece. I got a lot faster. The
You
longer I did it, the the less precious about it I got.
Yes.
Let's be honest here. So, in my defense,
yeah,
I am a perfectionist. I had a bit that I was dedicated to, which was writing all of my notes. I was coming at it from the position of someone who I was trying to really learn the language. I don't have any translation experience. I learned a couple of languages in high school and have not really kept up with them. I never really, and I didn't do any linguistics in college because I didn't get the chance to. So as a result, I was coming at this from, I don't know. I really wanted to be thorough about it.
You don't have to be on the defensive. I'm sure that if you had watched over my shoulder or Sarah's shoulder, you would have had similar yelling.
And actually, they watched over my shoulder, and I can say that they did.
And And there was more than you think there was, because I was doing the most of my screaming inside of my heart. So you know, there's a whole.
I do want to give Dash. I do want to give you a couple shout outs actually in terms of your translation style, which is number one, to the point of being kind of precious about it, but actually in a way that really warmed my heart, was that you were bound and determined that this language would not use English syntax. And
I was I was desperate. I was desperate for it to be something. Yeah. So for the folks that haven't played this game, ancient is thinly disguised English.
Syntactically,
It's
the rest of the
yeah,
way, but
yeah. Well, I mean, down to the idiom. All right, like we had to have and to hold as one of the random phrases you could get on a ruin. Come on, like.
Fair. Yeah.
Try harder.
Yes, and one of the things that the four of us, I think, and certainly Eli and Dash and I have debated about is the like, where do you draw the line between making this a truly foreign language and also making it accessible to someone who isn't a giant language nerd and is here for the badass art and music and mystery solving.
Yeah. Who wants to pretend that they are a linguist instead of actually be a linguist?
Yes. So there's that. But I really did appreciate the fact that you were like, I'm not going to think about this as if it were English. I'm not going to use common sense. I am going to approach this extremely scientifically. And you got over that after a while, but also it's just like I was doing that for a while too. And I was like, okay, like I wasn't being ridiculous. But the other thing that you picked up really quickly, and I didn't record my playthrough, so I don't know how soon you picked it up compared to when I did or when Eli did, but the words... Okay, wait, let me back up a second. When Eli and I did a pitch about this on the LXAD live show in April, we were like, we think it's logographic. And then, or possibly we're like, we think it's a syllabary, not an alphabet. And then, I don't know, I actually don't remember what we said, but we had theories about what kind of writing system it is, and I have since changed my mind about 4 times, and I still haven't decided. But regardless of the character-to-sound correspondence that we haven't quite solved yet, and by we,
I'm very interested to hear about that later.
Yes, so I should say, no one in this panel has solved that mystery yet. Which is not to say that it hasn't been solved, because there are at least 2 Discord servers strictly devoted to finding all of the words and all of the spoken words and converting them between each other. And people have written Discord bots named Six and NK and so forth that will do the translation for you. And it is deeply adorable.
Oh, that's precious.
And I have tried to avoid reading any of it because I want to solve it myself because I'm a nerd. But anyway, all of that aside, one of the things that Dash figured out really quickly is that the writing system has these little half-size characters that sit on the baseline.
Okay. So, you need... Masha, you need to ask the next question.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh... For formality's sake, what stands out to you about the ancient language and its writing system?
Thank you. Okay.
So Dash was playing, and they figured out that there is a certain class of noun, and I think the first one that they found was
water,
like elemental one. So there was water and
fire.
Yeah.
No, so there's water and then fire were the first 2 that I found, which meant that I thought that all of them might be elemental.
And I think you found light. But then you also found one that was like...
I found water, fire. The thing that I eventually found out was knowledge.
Yes. And then...
And then by the time I found light, I was very certain about the pattern. And so that light was the first thing that I immediately translated, and I felt so freaking good about it.
It was very good. And it was really cool because you were like, well, knowledge really isn't like a basic elemental thing. But maybe for this culture it is. Like, okay, that's interesting. And as it turns out,
Well, we should stop for just a second and say that the thing that we're actually talking about is one of the ways the writing system works is that many of the words have a part of speech signifier in front of them.
Yeah.
And the pattern that we're talking about is a word that has a noun signifier, one character, and then another character that follows it that is only ever used in this pattern. And I think the three of us started talking about them as cartouches, which is a word that's used in hieroglyphs, in Egyptian hieroglyphs, to mean a proper noun, which we're not using it for here. We're just kind of using it as an enclosure.
So
that was me.
Yes.
That was me. I came up with that.
You did. And so what I was going to say was that
it is my favorite thing that I figured out about the language and then I came up with.
Yes. And so what I was going to say was that we have these little half-size characters that lead into words that tell you what the part of speech is, which I think is a really awesome mechanic for the game, but also makes me really curious how they decided to turn this into a spoken language, because they do. And I don't think we're gonna have time to get to it, but there's a whole like series of Easter eggs you can find about like the cat kiss where Alia like grew up, and frankly even Elbereth, her name has a secret meaning, which is very cool.
Well, and of course there is the biggest big spoiler in the game is based on one of these, and that one I will not spoil.
That's mine. I get to spoil that one. But no, so these little part of speech things, which I'm like, okay, so if those have a sound, like, can you imagine a language where every verb starts with l and every noun starts with e? Like, that's really weird.
But that's Esperanto. Esperanto's endings are all part of speech based.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, my point is that's really cool, and I want to know about it, but not right now. But so Dash.
Well, okay, but Esperanto's a conlang, and a natural language would drop those over time, wouldn't it?
Maybe. And that's always the mystery, is like, what if it was this way, and again, like, how do you balance the realisticness of the language versus the need for a person to be able to solve it in a reasonable length of time?
Just because it's spoken, just because there's a written language that is then spoken, doesn't mean that you pronounce every character that's written.
Well,
also,
that's what I want to know. That's what I want to know, because they have the spoken version and they have the written version, which seem to be correlated. Like, the kiss ending is a specific character. The cat part is a thing.
Oh. And no, see, I haven't gotten to talk to you guys about the
we should, you know what, Dash?
Yeah, this is a several hour long discussion.
You on a stream, and we should do this another time. Keep an eye somewhere. Okay. We'll do that.
We'll just set that aside for now.
Yeah. But the thing that I thought was very cool was that so quickly you were like, all right, these little things indicate part of speech. And there's this other one that I don't know what it does, but it acts like a cartouche. It's like surrounds this character, and it's like a circumfix.
The definition
that says what it is. And it turns out it's not elemental. It's just, all right,
noun.
This is the core meaning of this character. This character can take lots of other meanings in compound words.
Yeah.
But the core meaning of the thing with the 3 lines pointing down is light.
Right.
Can mean a lot of other things if you put other things on it, but just by itself, that character means light.
Right.
Okay. I lost my train of thought. Eli, did you start to say something?
I don't know if I started to say something, but I can answer the question.
Okay.
About what stands out to me about the writing system. I think we've touched on a lot of things actually here, but one of the things that stands out to me about the writing system is that it spans several thousand years and has not changed a lot, as far as we know. As far as we know. And thinking about those part of speech signifiers, which are a really interesting choice, a lot of times, and you know, there's a Watsonian explanation here, and there's a Doyleist explanation here, where you get words that are homophones or maybe the same word but different parts of speech in English, and they use the same written ancient transcription. And so the question kind of is, is this for the benefit of the for the benefit of the player, the Doyleist interpretation, or is this something where the ancientest ancients used these parts of speech signifiers sort of directly and freely and switched them out, and then they got fossilized or lexicalized in, or reanalyzed somehow into not being part of speech signifiers anymore as you get later. And I think, obviously, if you look at the game from an outside perspective, there's obviously the Doyleist explanation and so on and so forth. But if you're really going to go inside of it, you could dig and you could compare and so on and so forth and see.
Well, I have a possible Watsonian explanation for why it wouldn't have changed. Because, we have some languages like Sanskrit that were codified and then don't get changed, right? That are still in use. Latin does not get updated. Whatever. I mean, and Latin's a dead language, right? But I had multiple thoughts at once.
This is what I said about the Watsonian explanation: is that they get lexicalized, become part of the thing.
There was a specific really cool idea that I had that I'm trying to pull back out of my brain in English. Sorry. What if the language remained the same? Because, first I was like, well, okay, it remains the same because it's got a religious connotation, right? Religion can hold on to ideas and ossify them. But what if it's more about the robots? Because you have to recode the robots in order to deal with language shift, and that's really hard. And if you're trying to code if you're trying to speak to a robot and get a robot to follow a specific instruction, you have to speak its language.
Which I would agree with, except that all of the robots speak modern.
Except for when they don't. But yeah, I see what you mean.
Well, they speak both.
Yeah.
Yeah, except that they can't do any translation, right?
Yeah, you're right.
So they yeah.
I think you have something there with the robot.
There might be. I mean, it might also just be that language change doesn't happen in this world. That
is the most unbelievable part of this setting, Eli.
Wait, hold on. No. I'm gonna say a thing and then we're gonna move on. But it maybe not language change doesn't happen, but the speed is very, very slow. And this is something that happens in other settings. In My Little Pony, for example, language change is much, much slower than it is in our world. All right, what's the next question?
Have predicted that was a thing the creators of the My Little Pony universe thought about?
I never got a chance to ask them.
Okay, very cool. Eli was promising comparisons to Stargate, and then we just did a 180, so that was great.
Do you want to just talk about the robots? Talk about the robots. I'll be fine.
Yeah, I was trying to get us over there because I knew that was the next question, and we got 15 minutes left. So I just let's. All right. So what is? I don't remember the phrasing of the question, but you want to just talk about the robots?
Talk about the robots. Are they sentient or not?
Oh, that was the question.
Yes.
Well, okay. So I'm going to give a quick spiel about the robots, which is you have this robot that accompanies you everywhere that looks sort of like if R2-D2 and BB-8 had a child and it maybe had the personality of C-3PO, but less polite.
I don't agree with any of this description. It's all incorrect.
Anyway, you have this robot that follows you around, and it seems very robotic, and it seems very I have a job and you have to do the thing. And And my brother actually made an observation at one point that it felt so much like talking to a real computer because it would answer the question exactly as it was asked. And if you said, "Do you know what time it is?" Six would say, "Yes." And you would have to be like, "Okay, so what time is it?" Like, it was getting none of the underlying conversational implications. And that's fine. And then there's 2 points at which we start to learn a couple other things about robots. And in particular, I know Dash found out the thing about the tell us about the graveyard robot, or not robot.
Oh, well, that didn't happen in my playthrough.
Yeah, Dash missed that.
Dreamed about it.
No, it happened in the
That happened in my playthrough.
It happened in Masha's playthrough.
Yes, but Dash screamed about it when it happened, so giving them a lead in.
Sure, fine. Okay, so the thing is that I had already, like, I'd put together, without that information, without experiencing the graveyard thing, I had already put together that I had already gone through the Withering Palace. I had already figured out, before I even got to the Withering Palace, thank you, I had already figured out that there was the whole thing about I just realized that there's chat. Anyway,
well,
I forgot what I was saying. I'm sorry.
Basically, at one point, you learn that at least some of the robots, that there are robots that that just kind of wander around and are kind of dumbly programmed, and you have also robots that at least some of them have recordings of people in them, and that is the thing that sort of gives them their personality, or is an underlying part of their personality, or kind of gives them the ability to do some kind of reasoning or that kind of thing. And
thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, the question of are the robots sentient is like, I think the obvious answer is yes, and then the deeper answer is, I don't know. How do they put people in robots, and what is that process? Because you do sort of learn that it's not a whole person. It's kind of a layer of a person.
It's a recording.
It's a recording of a person at a particular time in their life.
Yeah.
And that it's a knockoff of a technology that allows people to sort of be preserved beyond death.
But the thing about that,
not a knockoff. I think it is the technology that
it's a further use of that technology.
Yeah. So the thing that's interesting is when Masha got to the graveyard, and I believe this happened to me in my first playthrough as well, they find this like metal horseshoe, which if you have the robot with you when you find it, the robot will freak the fuck out and tell you to put it down and don't touch that, and what is wrong with you? And Alia will be like, what the hell? And if you press it, the robot will be like, that is a robot neck. Get that the fuck away from me. You are touching a dismembered member of my species. That's creepy.
That is not what Six said to me.
So
yeah, to me, Six treated it more like a sacred object than a
exactly. Yeah.
So I forget.
Six was like, you do not know what you have wrought.
Well, and I guess it does say that, but later it says, or someone told me at some point, like a character told me, oh yeah, like that was creepy because it is the neck of a robot. And you can take that robot neck and you can set it on this gravestone, and you can, there's Obi-Wan's head poking up out of the things, but it's not Obi-Wan, it's a dead child empress, and that's actually creepier.
So baby Anakin then. Yes,
baby Anakin pops up out of the gravestone, and you're like, holy cow, all right then. And this was the way that they would, like Eli said, kind of take a snapshot of these people at their death so that they could like live in this embodied way. But it's not a recording the way the Star Wars ones are, where it's like, help me Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it just plays on loop. It's like a living breathing but robot.
I mean, it's a teleporter copy that's never re-put into physical.
It
yeah,
is.
like
It's
like
body, but
canonically.
only beamed out the brain. And
Yeah, canonically, it's the non-physical part of the person.
right. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting because it's like, okay, so so for a while they were hoppering the brains of people into these gravestones so that they could live forever. But then they also started hoppering people's brains into robots so that they could live forever and also walk around. And also take over the world and then be enslaved and then take over the world again. And, you know, as people...
It's a whole thing.
But it's... Eli, go ahead.
Well, so there is an interesting thing in there, which is that you referred to Six as it. And for a long time, especially at Dash's playthrough, I didn't speak aloud a lot during mine, so I don't really know if I had an opinion on this, but Dash would refer to Six as them, which makes a lot of sense.
Well, I tried to use it because that was the pronoun that was being used. And I found that very difficult to do. And I would regularly mess up and use he or they because I decided fairly early on that Six was sentient.
But
yeah.
So in my I want to go a little bit back to the language here, because if you look at the writing system of the language, you get a set of pronouns, and we're not going to talk about the actual composition of the pronouns, because that's a whole thing. But you learn I, you, and they. You learn the first, second, and third person pronouns, and you also
learn it.
And you also learn it, which does not fit the pattern. The first, second, and third pronouns are the person sign, and then either the numbers 1, 2, or 3.
Yep.
The it word is person sign, and then there's another sign which I think people translate it differently, but I've translated it as an animate thing. So you get it with animals, and you also get it with robots, and you also get it with it.
Yep.
And there's a lot of Zoyalists that just used this anytime in English where it could be used, especially in expletive uses where it definitely wouldn't refer to an animate thing. But it was really interesting to me that they would have this separate animate person, third person word, because to me that says sort of explicitly, if you were to translate it to English, that the word you should use to refer to a robot is it and not they, because... And you might even actually do that with people, depending, because it has the person radical in it.
Yes. And so then the really interesting thing is that in the game, Alia always refers to Six as it, or very cleverly in the writing as the robot, in places where you might have found NK and you might have found Six, and the writer doesn't want to spoil for you that there's another robot, which I thought was very
so. And I realized that after that point, but like for me before that point, I think I like even without that, I think it's still appropriate.
Yeah.
Like Watsonianly, because for Alia, the robot is an object, and it's
absolutely.
an interchangeable object.
Yes. But so then it's
I don't know if I agree with that, but keep going.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of things happening there, but grammatically the interesting thing is that when you meet NK, who is also a robot, but also identifies herself as the hoppered brain of a past human being, she is always she.
Mm-hmm.
Partly because she introduces herself that way, but also partly because, like, I mean, I guess mostly because she introduces herself that way, but then you're like, okay, so Six is this theoretically interchangeable tool robot thing, but it has a personality, it makes decisions, it has all of the same characteristics that NK has, but is always an it. And that is very interesting. And relatedly, one of my favorite lines that Six delivered, which he I should say, does not deliver in every game, but if you do the right things, you end up in the right place. At the Withering Palace, Alia looks around at the statues of the 6 gods, and there's one of them that she can't decide whether it's a god or goddess, which, by the way, in Ancient are the same word. It makes no gender distinctions. So she is always...
Which I appreciate.
So she always translates it contextually based on what she knows in her modern language of whether this deity is a god or a goddess. And there's one that she can't figure out, and she goes, I don't know what to call it. And 6 says, what would a god do with a gender anyway? And I was just like...
But that is also, I mean, on the one hand, it's a great question to ask. But on the other hand, eventually, you discover that the gods, in fact, don't have genders. That it plugs into why they have one eye and all of this stuff. And in the end of the end game, if you're paying attention, or if you, you're in the Sculptor's Moon and you get trapped underground and you find the buried god there, the gods are AIs. They don't have genders.
And they've been given genders by the humans who worship them.
Yep.
And so it's, I mean, yeah, like on the one hand, it's a really great question. On the other hand, that's like such a good Easter egg, because 6 is to some degree also an AI. Question mark, unclear. What's the difference between a hoppered human brain and an AI? Come back to me in 6 years when we've done some research and screamed a lot. But just, there's so much in this game. And like, I was talking to Masha the other day that like one of the things I think they could have done better in terms of presenting the game is that there is absolutely no way to learn all there is to learn about the world or the people or the story in one playthrough. And like one playthrough is a complete story from start to finish, but you're going to leave a lot of threads untied. Loose ends, I guess, is the phrase for that.
You're going to have to loop back and...
So actually, Eli, since we are coming up on time, I would like to give my favorite like spoiler moment that you alluded to earlier about the parts of speech, and I want you to give your New Game Plus spoiler, because that's like my favorite thing about this whole dang game. And then if there's questions other people have, I'm willing to stay a little bit late and take them. But and Dash, if there's anything that you want to throw out there, I don't know. I just know Eli and I've talked about these two things.
I'm actually not going to give mine. I think we've done a bunch of spoiling, and it's my very favorite Easter egg, and I think it's a nice reward for being brave in the end game. But what I will say is that things change in later playthroughs, and so you should play the game more than once.
And if you don't want to play it more than once, there's a ton of people who are playing on Twitch, and I have yet to meet. Yeah, I mean, Dash did, Masha did. We've made.
Well, I'm going to be doing a second playthrough.
Dash is going to be doing it again. I might do it again, and there's 10 other people that are doing it, and I've yet to see anyone make the same set of choices by accident. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff, and I would also add on to Eli's that, in particular, things change in the second playthrough if you do, like he said, if you do the brave thing. If you do the safe thing, you're going to play
you play a safe game. Yeah.
Play a safe game. You get fewer Easter eggs, but also you have the ability to get as many new games as you want. So do whatever you want. My favorite thing.
Before you go, real quick, and sorry, Masha, I'm kind of doing the moderator job here, but if you have a question, go ahead and stand to the right of the hex of the lectern up front, and then we'll know that there are people who have questions.
Very smart.
So if you do not wish to appear on camera, I guess you can also DM your question to me and I will present it to our panelists. Just please come up and stand around the stage anyway so that I know I need to get a word in edgewise. They know that I need to get a word in edgewise.
All right. So my favorite thing is I got to the last location, and before I even the whole time you're searching for Heaven's Vault, and unsurprisingly, we're all like, "Ah, yes, a vault, a place like a bank vault, like a Gringotts vault."
Hey,
like,
they set you up for that.
Oh,
They did set you up for that.
Oh yeah, of course they do.
And Dash, I will say another thing that Eli and I yelled at each other about, and one of the things that he threw in the chat that was like deliberately obscured by all of his other bullshit in the chat, was the part where you like parkour jump over a wall. He goes, "Oh, you vaulted," and then buried it in the chat, and we laughed about it.
Well, I just thought he was punning.
Right.
Yes, I know. That's why I did that.
That's the whole game. The whole game is a giant fucking pun, and they don't tell you, obviously. So I get to the end, and I'm at the big door with the sign that basically says, "This is a place of no honor, and turn back now before everything goes to shit," and whatever.
Yeah.
And, but it doesn't say that. All it says is Heaven's Vault. And
Yes, it does.
It depends.
I
There's
mean,
a couple
there's
of
second
different
line.
things.
yeah, okay, that's true. It says Heaven's Vault, and then it says turn back now before everything goes to shit, but in prettier language.
Yeah. The seventh god will kill you and eat you. Don't come
There's,
here.
there are 3 or 4
Heaven's
different
Vault
things that can be
slurping
on that
up
door.
the entire world, and everything's gonna die. And so I get to translating Heaven's Vault, and I've seen the word heaven before, and so that fills in really quickly. And then I look at vault, and I'm given my 4 multiple choice options, which, to my earliest question about what are things that are unlike real life, it feels like you don't get given multiple choice right off the bat. You also don't have a robot who follows you around and tells you when you've done it wrong. But anyway.
I'm glad I don't have a robot that follows me around and tells me when I've done it wrong.
That sounds like hell. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I go and I'm looking and I see,
And then you're like, well, if it's wrong, then fucking help. And they're like, I can't remember. And also I have no hands.
Yeah.
but so I get vault and I'm like trying to translate it, and I'm like, it has the 2 little lines in front of it that mean it's a verb. And I literally texted Eli in all caps. He wasn't even watching me play, but just out of the blue, I was like, vault is a verb! And he was just like cackling. It was the best moment of the entire game.
Amazing.
I mean, I missed it. I missed it because I was just like, oh yes, I already know this word. And like, it took until the end of the game, and the 2 people who were watching me play, neither of whom were Sarah or Eli, were like, hey, did you notice that vault's a verb? And I was like, oh, it is. How did I miss that? Ah! Anyway.
You didn't miss it. You just got it way, way, way ahead and then forgot.
Yes.
Yes.
It looks like we have a question.
Yes, we do have an audience question.
Oh, hey. Participation.
Right.
What's that?
It's okay, Basha. I do this all the time on Linguistics After Dark. I've got practice.
Okay. Yeah, you just got me up here to make faces. It's fine. Bex would like to know if Elbereth is a Tolkien reference.
As far as I'm aware, it's not. I've watched John Ingold, who is the guy who designed the language and who's the story writer, talk a lot about his influences, and talk a lot about the words, and I've read a lot of stuff, and as far as I can tell, the answer is no. He has a lot of influences that have to do with like Age of Exploration and like Howard Carter and Egyptology. And also Monica Hanna, who is an archaeologist working in Egypt right now, who is documenting all of the looting that happened in the Arab Spring and all over Egypt, and is on a campaign to try to get Egyptians to like think of their history as something that belongs to them rather than something that belongs to the state or the tourists. There's been a long history of exploitation of artifacts in Egypt and them being sold and so on and so forth. And she's really trying to get the population of Egypt to kind of help reverse that trend. Anyway, but also Stargate. He started with Stargate, and we're out of time, so I'm not going to talk a lot about it. But he basically was like, okay, archaeology is neat, but if you're going to put a game about it, you have to have them eventually be discovering an ancient super weapon, because that's how Stargate makes archaeology cool and ancient linguistics cool and all of that stuff. And then he was like, yeah, but it can't be an ancient super weapon because Stargate did that already, so I have to find something else to do it, and that's what Heaven Salt is built around. But yeah, it might be a secret reference, but he so far has never said that that it's a reference.
Yeah, the influences that I saw were definitely all like sci-fi, traditional sci-fi, like the ethical course straight out of Asimov, and like yeah.
Someone pointed out that Alia's name, unlike basically all the other names in the game, is an actual first name used by English-speaking people, and that it is a name derived from Hebrew, where it has the same underlying meaning as it does in Ancient.
Yeah, that one was a little suspicious for me, and I kind of wonder about that. So I think that there might be a couple of hidden things in there, and then I think there might be a couple of accidental things. I mean, even Tolkien had Tyrion upon Tuna. So
had what?
There's a place in Middle Earth, or not Middle Earth, in Arda called Tuna, which is just what that word comes out as when you translate it from the meaning he wanted it to have.
Sure.
And it has nothing to do with fish. And he is like, I wish that I had changed that, but I didn't. So now, Tyrion upon Tuna.
Right, and I mean,
at your local sushi restaurant.
So I'm really curious, like, is Alia's name a deliberate sort of Easter egg, or is it just one of those things where there's a limited number of sounds in the world and sometimes they happen to mean the same thing? So
yeah, I mean, you can only put one or two of those Easter eggs in, or if you want to have an underlying consistent sound to graph connection, which it seems that he does, because he spends a lot of time teasing you about having meeting out spoken words.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What does Alia's name mean?
The Ya part means high.
It's a exalted one or high one.
Yep. The Ya, which you see also in Kibenya and some of the other people names, is the light and the up, the one that looks like a lowercase I, for like sky.
Yeah, and Ya, of course, is a one of the things that refers to God, and we can, in Hebrew, and we can get into very deep into which God historically and theologically and so on and so forth. But.
And then I guess actually the Ali part you also see in Ifarali and the other thing.
Ifarali, yeah.
8 says when it zooms you up somewhere.
Yeah.
Or takes the person to a place, something like that. I would have to look it back up in my notes, but Eli and I at one point started going, oh my god, every single god that has a name, their name ends in Ya. And a bunch of the emperors did as well. Not NK, but the dead girl in the graveyard was somebody Ya. Anyway.
Yep.
Anyway. So we are about out of time.
Aww.
And so thank you all for coming.
Thank you all for staying.
Thank you all for staying. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you play the game. It's on sale right now. I got an email about it this morning. Anyway, if you liked this, there will be many, many more linguistics panels and xenoarchaeology panels, because I know who we are as people, at CrossingsCon next summer in August of 2022, because that's when next summer is, in Montreal, Canada. As we said, registration is open at register.crossingscon.org right now. Or you can go out to the info desk in the lobby. There is a treasure chest where you can buy your badge, and a pile of coins where you can support us with a one-time donation to our Ko-fi. And we appreciate your support.
There's also the mailing list, which is on the
yes, the mailing list
announcement on the chat. And by the way, if you do buy the game and you decide that you're going to stream it, please let us know, because we'd love to come.
We will all be in your Twitch chat
and encourage you and yell about discoveries with you, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Yeah, I will be starting my second playthrough. Actually, no time soon, because I promised I would play Outer Wilds first. So actually, I have no idea. Never mind.
But, follow Meerkat Dash on Twitch, and then you'll know.
It's going to be something else later, but it's Meerkat Dash for now.
All right. This was a lot of fun. Dash and Sarah, thank you for chatting. This was great.
Yeah, no, I've been looking forward to
this. This was great.
Pushing.
Thanks for letting me.
These other two into the game.
Yeah, thanks for letting me crash your party.
You were invited. It's a great party. Have a good rest of your night, folks.
Bye.
Bye.